Ed Sullivan and the seven music legends he believed were truly dangerous. Every Sunday night, for nearly 2 decades, America performed the same ritual. Dinners were finished early, conversations paused, living room lights dimmed, and millions of families turned their attention to a black and white television set, trusting one man to decide who deserved entry into their homes. Ed Sullivan did not smile easily. He did not charm audiences with warmth or charisma. His delivery was stiff, his posture awkward, his introductions famously clumsy. Yet despite, or perhaps because of this unpolished presence, Sullivan became the most powerful gatekeeper in entertainment history. A single appearance on his stage could transform a struggling performer into a national phenomenon. A rejection, or worse, a ban, could quietly suffocate a career before it truly began. To the public, Sullivan was merely a host, but behind the scenes, he was something far more consequential. He watched closely. He listened carefully. He noticed how performers treated waitstaff, band members, assistants, and spouses. He paid attention to what happened when applause faded and cameras stopped rolling. Sullivan believed something deeply unfashionable today, that fame carried moral responsibility. And over time, he became convinced that some of the biggest stars of the 20th century possessed not just flaws, but something far darker. In private conversations, in personal notes discovered long after his death, and in recollections from staff who worked by his side, a pattern emerged. There were artists whose talent he admired, whose music thrilled audiences, yet whose character alarmed him. He believed they were capable of real harm. Tonight, we explore the 7 music legends Ed Sullivan privately believed crossed a line from troubled to dangerous. Their music shaped generations. Their influence is undeniable. But their personal conduct tells a far more disturbing story, one Sullivan recognized long before the rest of the world was ready to listen. And the first case shocked him so deeply that he never forgave it. Jerry Lee Lewis, when talent couldn't excuse the unforgivable. Jerry Lee Lewis didn't walk onto the stage, he detonated. When he appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1957, he embodied everything America both feared and secretly craved about rock and roll. He pounded the piano as if challenging it to survive. He kicked benches aside, stood atop the keys, and howled lyrics with reckless abandon. They called him the Killer, and for a moment it felt prophetic in the best possible way. Lewis wasn't just successful, he was explosive. With hits like Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On and Great Balls of Fire, he looked poised to rival Elvis Presley himself. Sullivan, cautious by nature, still placed his stamp of approval on Lewis by featuring him prominently. Then came the revelation that changed everything. While touring the United Kingdom, reporters uncovered a truth so shocking it instantly halted Lewis's rise. At just 22 years old, he had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. As the scandal unfolded, it became clear Lewis had attempted to minimize the outrage by lying about her age. When Sullivan learned the details, he was furious, not just morally but personally. He believed Lewis had deceived him into promoting someone whose actions violated everything Sullivan stood for. Lewis was immediately blacklisted. Radio stations stopped playing his music. Venues canceled bookings. His appearance fees collapsed from thousands of dollars a night to barely a few hundred. A career that once looked unstoppable disintegrated almost overnight. But Sullivan's instincts went deeper than outrage over a single act. In the decades that followed, Jerry Lee Lewis's life became a trail of violence, addiction, and tragedy. His 7 marriages were riddled with allegations of physical abuse. 2 wives died under circumstances that raised disturbing questions. One drowned shortly before a divorce, another died of a methadone overdose barely weeks into marriage. Looking back, historians believe Sullivan didn't just see scandal. He sensed a pattern, a lack of restraint, a disregard for boundaries, a man whose talent masked something volatile and dangerous. Time would prove that instinct hauntingly accurate. James Brown. The sound of genius and the rage beneath it. James Brown didn't merely perform, he commanded. His appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show were feats of discipline and stamina. His band moved like a single organism, every note precise, every step rehearsed to perfection. Sullivan himself christened him the hardest working man in show business. But behind the sequins and choreography, Sullivan witnessed something deeply unsettling. Brown demanded absolute obedience. Musicians lived in fear of fines for wrinkled shoes or missed beats. Explosive anger lurked just beneath the surface. Control wasn't just professional, it was personal. Sullivan reportedly confided to a producer, "That man has a devil inside him." Brown's criminal history didn't emerge overnight. It stretched back before fame and followed him throughout his career. Arrests for domestic violence, weapons charges, drug possession, and repeated accusations of brutal abuse from women close to him. What troubled Sullivan most wasn't arrogance or ego, traits common among stars, but the consistency of violence and domination. Brown's relationships were defined by fear, not partnership. Yet Sullivan faced a dilemma. Brown's cultural impact was undeniable. His music was revolutionary. Sullivan continued booking him, but insiders noticed a shift. There was no warmth, no backstage camaraderie, only a careful distance. Decades later, as allegations piled up and arrests mounted, Sullivan's discomfort seemed less like conservatism and more like foresight. Chuck Berry, the architect of rock and roll, and its darkest contradiction, Chuck Berry didn't just influence rock music, he wrote its blueprint. His guitar riffs, witty lyrics, and swaggering persona defined teenage rebellion and shaped generations of musicians. When Berry first appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, America witnessed something entirely new. But Sullivan's admiration quickly eroded. As Berry's legal troubles became public, Sullivan struggled to reconcile brilliance with behavior. Berry's criminal record wasn't rumor, it was documented. An armed robbery conviction in his youth. Then, at the height of fame, a conviction under the Mann Act for transporting a 14-year-old girl across state lines. For Sullivan, this was unforgivable. He believed in redemption. But crimes involving minors crossed a moral boundary he would not compromise. Berry appeared once and never again. The years that followed only deepened the contradiction. Berry returned to music, but legal troubles continued. Tax evasion charges and later, lawsuits alleging women were secretly filmed in a bathroom at a restaurant he owned. Sullivan had been forced into a question that still echoes today. How do we separate art from artist when the artist's actions are this disturbing? Elvis Presley, The King, the Crown, and the Uneasy Power of Worship. Elvis Presley didn't just change music, he transformed American culture. His appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show drew record-breaking audiences. Parents panicked. Teenagers screamed. A nation felt something shift beneath its feet. Sullivan initially resisted booking Elvis, disturbed by the singer's provocative style. When he finally relented, the infamous decision to film Elvis only from the waist up became legend. But Sullivan's concern ran deeper than hips. He watched the crowds. He studied the devotion of teenage girls. What unsettled him wasn't rebellion, it was imbalance. The near-religious worship of a grown man by young, impressionable fans. Unlike others on this list, Elvis had no criminal record. But his personal relationships raised questions. Priscilla Beaulieu met Elvis at 14. He controlled her appearance, her movements, her life. Sullivan eventually praised Elvis publicly, even endorsing his character. Yet privately, staff recalled lingering unease. Sullivan wasn't judging a crime, he was questioning influence. Phil Spector. When brilliance turned into a loaded weapon, Phil Spector reshaped pop music without ever stepping into the spotlight. His wall of sound changed how records were made, creating emotional intensity unmatched in its time. Yet, Sullivan refused to feature him. Something about Spector disturbed him profoundly. Stories circulated of guns in recording sessions, of artists intimidated and controlled, of erratic behavior that went beyond arrogance. Years later, Ronnie Spector would reveal the horrifying truth. She was virtually imprisoned, threatened with death if she left. Sullivan's fears would culminate decades later when actress Lana Clarkson was found dead in Spector's home. He was convicted of murder and died in prison. What Sullivan sensed early was not eccentricity, it was danger. Ike Turner. Control hidden behind perfect choreography. Ike and Tina Turner were electric. Their performances crackled with energy and precision. Tina's voice was thunderous. Ike's band was flawless. But backstage, Sullivan noticed something chilling. Ike watched Tina constantly, controlled every aspect of her life. Sullivan developed a warm relationship with Tina and a cold, deliberate distance from Ike. Years later, Tina Turner's escape would expose years of brutal abuse, beatings, threats, humiliation, terror. Sullivan had seen the signs long before the world believed her. Jim Morrison, one promise broken, one fate sealed. The Doors' 1967 appearance should have been triumphant. Instead, it became legendary for all the wrong reasons. Morrison promised to change a lyric. When cameras rolled, he stared directly into the lens and defied Sullivan on live television. For Sullivan, this wasn't rebellion, it was betrayal. He believed character revealed itself under pressure. Morrison's defiance confirmed Sullivan's fear that something destructive lived inside him. Within years, Morrison spiraled into addiction and chaos, dying at 27. Sullivan had seen the ending before the story finished. The Sullivan Standard: power, responsibility, and moral judgment. Ed Sullivan was not flawless. His values reflected his time. Yet, he believed something radical, that fame demanded accountability. He saw himself as a guardian of trust. When performers violated it, he acted, not perfectly but decisively. Decades later, his instincts appear unsettlingly accurate. In a world of unlimited platforms and algorithmic promotion, Sullivan's role feels impossible. Yet his questions remain urgent. How much does character matter? Who decides where the line is drawn, and what responsibility comes with influence? Ed Sullivan answered those questions alone every Sunday night. History continues to decide whether he was right